I'm on mute.
Teana. You're not on mute, but you're not on mute.
Okay.
Huh? You got the green bag here.
Can hear everyone? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Damall Keith. Welcome to the How to Advocate for Your Child Forum for Black and Brown Parents and Guardians during the pandemic and after, hosted by the Honey Brown Hope Foundation in partnership with Fox 26 News. Now, there are 3 different ways to participate in the event today. This event is streaming on Fox 26 Houston Live, on the Honey Brown Hope Foundation Facebook page live, as well as on Fox 26 Houston Facebook page. Now, the event will be recorded, and you can watch the event again on those 3 places that I just mentioned, and you can also share it as many times as you like so that your friends and family can see this as well. You can also submit questions on Twitter and make sure you are following along and participating in the conversation and using the hashtag. Now, today I'm your moderator for what is an incredibly distinguished panel to discuss a really important topic, the school to prison pipeline, and how Black and Brown parents can protect their children against it. Now, many don't know, and I didn't know this, that prisons are built based on the number of 3rd graders who fail. Again, I'm going to say that one more time. And this is somebody who's trying to get into to watch the forum. But prisons are built based on the number of 3rd graders who fail. This is how the term school to prison pipeline was coined. And the school to prison pipeline is truly a disturbing national trend where Black and Brown children are disproportionately funneled out of schools and into juvenile and criminal justice systems because of what advocates call harsh, excessive, wrongful punishments, discriminatory policies. And they say this is all too often happening to Black and Brown children. Now, for over 25 years, the Honey Brown Hope Foundation has worked to find solutions, prevent and derail the school to prison pipeline. And during this Black History Month, the foundation took all of the strategy, insights, and lessons learned from helping families and poured them into the How to Advocate for Your Child toolkit for Black and Brown parents and guardians. And it's to help parents to be a much better advocate for their children, because a lot of parents, when it comes to the criminal justice system, they just have no idea how to advocate for their kiddos. Now, here to discuss the school to prison pipeline and tips to help Black and Brown parents combat it are our panelists. Tammie Campbell, the founder of Honey Brown Hope Foundation. She's also a community activist and author of How to Advocate for Your Child toolkit for Black and Brown parents and guardians. Hello, Tammie. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for hosting this.
Thank you, Damall, for moderating this.
Now, I am not hearing you, so hopefully you can still hear me. Judge Michael Fields is also a panelist. He's a retired Harris County Criminal Court judge. Hello, Judge Fields.
Hey, Damall, how are you? Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Dr. Howard Henderson, founding director of the Center for Justice Research and professor of Justice Administration in the Texas Southern University's Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs. Dr. Henderson, thank you for your expertise this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
And Judge Teana Watson, who presides over the Fort Bend County Court at Law number 5 and serves as Fort Bend Juvenile Board Chair. Judge Watson, I know you've seen a thing or two, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this discussion.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I touched a little bit on the data about the school to prison pipeline for Black and Brown students. So let's discuss the impact of that. And Dr. Henderson, for those watching who may not realize how close to home the school to prison pipeline actually hits, will you please share what research you've found about the school to prison pipeline in Texas?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is we often look at these as if there's something that's happening so far away, but we analyzed several school districts in our state, and we found very similar results in all of them. What we found was that Black kids in grades 3 through 12 were 3 to 6 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school, even though many of these school districts continue to have regressive policies toward criminalizing being Black in our school systems. You also saw that Black kids were disciplined at a rate 4 times higher than any other racial group around. We found that 70% of these suspensions were as a result of discretionary reasons. Specifically, Black students were more likely to be suspended for discretionary reasons such as dress code violations, long hair violations, neither of which have been found to be predictive of student misconduct. And I think if we understand the extent to which these problems occur, I think we're in a better position to solve them. So those are just sort of the peripheral numbers. And hopefully as we go through the conversation, I'll be able to provide more facts about the status of kids in our school system.
And you said understanding it will help us solve it better. That absolutely makes a lot of sense. And with forums exactly like this and hearing from experts like you guys, that's how we better understand it. That's how we better get a better solution. And navigating this type of system is something that's absolutely foreign to so many parents. Lots of parents know how to help with homework and, do school projects, but getting beyond that and getting into the criminal justice system, so many parents have no idea how to navigate their way through that. So Tammie, I know you've been an advocate for kids for decades now, and you've talked about this publicly. You've helped so many different families, and you've exposed injustices that have happened to kiddos in schools and other places. Talk a little bit about how parents should even start. Where do they even start to advocate for their kids when they end up in a situation like this?
Well, Damall, first of all, I want parents to know that you are your child's expert in terms of knowing who your child is. With that being said, I want them to be proactive in this process. Proactive means that you be actively engaged in your child's education to be a partner. And that's why I developed this toolkit to help parents navigate the system, because it is a system. And parents have to know that when you go into a parent-teacher conference, the questions to ask, and also making sure that the educator knows that you want the school to be successful because you want your child to the standards for having a partnership. When you look at our toolkit, that is information. Information is something that you use in all different aspects of your life. You don't go in without knowing what to do. When you notify the school, which we have covered, my child is not to be questioned give a statement without my permission, and without my permission or presence. Now, when you're talking about that, we look at how we are protected as adults. Our children aren't protected in the same way. In fact, most parents don't know when they take their child to school and drop their child off. It's known as in parental local, where you give the school permission. The school has the authority to become the parent, and they have more power and authority over your child. So therefore, you need to make sure that the school system knows that you haven't given over your power as a parent, and you protect your child. And whenever you have an issue with a disciplinary issue, and you have a meeting with the educator, you make sure you take someone with you and record the information. All of that is put into this toolkit based on the experience that I have been able to get with caring parents across the river on my back with their children. And I am so elated that now we're able to, instead of giving parents a fish, this toolkit is teaching them how to fish and to be proactive and derailing the school to prison pipeline.
And the whole goal of your toolkit, of this forum, the whole goal of talking about this is to protect the children. And Tammie, you talked about the toolkit and having parents arm themselves with tools so that they can better protect their children. This toolkit is found on your website?
Yes, it is, Damall, at www. Yes, on the foundation's website at www.honeybrownhope.org. And as well as our contact information if you need additional information and trying to make sure that we protect our children, because when we protect our children, that's our first priority as parents. And knowing how to protect our children, we're not only going to derail the school to prison pipeline, but the excessive number of our people who are incarcerated. And we want to be proactive in that process to start right now, and before our children return to school. And so it's so important that we have released this during this time when children will be returning to school, and you're going to have additional issues because of this pandemic. Children aren't as supervised when they have been able to be at home and
yeah, and once a child enters into the judicial system, into that criminal justice system, it is not a very good place for them to be. It can oftentimes be very hard for kids to get out of that system or out of that pipeline. Dr. Henderson, what are some of the options for parents? And we're talking about tools for Black and brown parents. Obviously, this isn't only an issue for Black and brown parents, but advocates say that this type of issue disproportionately affects Black and brown parents and children. So, Dr. Henderson, in your research, what do you find typically is there a leading or a usual infraction or reason that students end up in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system?
Yeah, 80% of these kids who end up in our juvenile justice system, we found don't have proper legal representation. Many of these families are indigent. And so a lot of times this becomes a legal matter, and these children and their families are just simply under-resourced. if we can figure out a way to provide these kids with proper legal representation so that families are well armed with the facts about how they can deal with the system, we found that makes a difference. If a child's family has the money to provide them the legal resources that they need, they're significantly more likely to not end up in our juvenile justice system. And I would think that is one of the single most significant predictors of whether or not a kid ends up in this space. Beyond the behavioral issues, I think a lot of these issues boil down to just simply not having the money to provide the individual representation that they may need in the system.
Wow, and no one should end up in the criminal justice system simply because they don't have the money to buy an appropriate representation. Judge Watson, from your perspective as the Fort Bend Juvenile Board Chair, what tips do you have for parents?
So what parents need to understand is the juvenile justice system is designed to rehabilitate. It's designed to give a juvenile offender an opportunity for a second chance. If you can, as Dr. Henderson stated, if you can provide your own resources, and think about what your resources are, your primary care physician assisting somehow with a diagnosis for your child, a psychologist, a counselor, a therapist. If you can provide your own alternatives for the system, you can help keep your child out the system, because the system is designed to just make sure, in most cases, to rehabilitate that child. Now, in the event you don't have access to those resources, then the juvenile justice system will provide those supports and services. And you can still request that the system deal with your child informally. In other words, the child doesn't have to get a record, doesn't have to go to court. In some instances, in most instances, if the offenses are misdemeanors and not serious, you can get what is called a deferred prosecution or an informal agreement. Once again, the opportunity is for the child to become rehabilitated. So in some of those cases, as Dr. Henderson pointed out, if the parents have money, they have resources, they have insurance, they can provide that alternative. That child may bypass the system. On the other hand, if that parent does not, you can still find a way for that child to get help and become rehabilitated without giving that child a juvenile record.
Judge Fields, what tips or advice do you have for parents?
I'd say that, just echoing what the doctor said, what the judges said, you are your child's best advocate. And advocates have to train themselves up. That's where toolkits and research come into play. But mostly, parents need to know that they have rights. Parents have a Bill of Rights here in Texas under the Education Code, where they can access disciplinary records, where they can access educational records. They can find out what tests their child has taken and how they're done on those things. They can find out what their counselors have to say in some limited respects. And, in this time, and Damall, you've mentioned it a couple of times, this time of pandemic, when we're seeing the governor do away with the mask mandate, and we're seeing school districts say to students, you have to come back to school without masks. These are the kinds of things that will necessarily give rise to problems in the school, because parents are telling their kids different things about the value of masks and whether or not they work, the value of social distancing and whether or not it works. And so the Texas Education Code provides for a state virtual school network, where if you feel uncomfortable with your child being in school and you think that that might lead to some acting out behavior on some other kid's part that might get your child drawn in, you can ask to have your child engage in online learning so that they don't have to be exposed to all of those things that may come with loosened restrictions in the school setting. But mostly, I think that parents need to know that loud is not better. Just because you're angry, and it's understandable that you're angry when someone is coming at your child, yelling, getting upset doesn't help. Sometimes, and most times, it hurts. What we have to do is take a deep breath, look at this toolkit, understand that we can tell our schools that as an in loco parentis actor, you don't have the ability to question my child. Chapter 26 of the Education Code says that the parents' rights are not exclusive that are listed in the Education Code. So there are other rights that a parent can exercise. And the greatest of those is the right to remain silent. When asked questions, the child should be saying, I'd like to speak with a lawyer. I'd like to speak with my parents. I'm going to wait until I speak with a lawyer and my parents. And there are organizations, Damall, in this county that can help. And if not help, then at least refer to help. The Houston Bar Association, the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association, Dr. Henderson at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law at TSU, there are clinics that can assist poor people, indigent people, in getting the help that they need.
And these are certainly tips a lot of parents need to hear. And I want to remind the viewers to please join in on the conversation. You can ask questions on Twitter. Make sure you use the hashtag Black and Brown Parent Forum. Again, the hashtag is Black and Brown Parent Forum. And Judge Fields, you touched on this a little bit. You talked a little bit about students' rights if they're being questioned. But what are some of those laws and policies that parents really need to be aware of when they're advocating for their child, and they really need to know that law and that policy if their kid ends up in this situation? Judge Fields, let's start with you on that one.
So as I said, the number one thing that parents and students need to understand is you have the right to remain silent. Remain silent. In a number of occasions, activity that occurs outside of the school will be questioned inside of the school setting. And because the teachers, the administrators are acting as parents for your child, and they're supposed to be acting as partners with the parents, but in this instance, they sometimes seem to act more like agents of the state. Your child needs to understand that they have the constitutional right to remain silent and wait until they speak with a legal professional before they make any statement. If you're being asked about criminal activity, there's a very good chance you're the subject of the investigation.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And that's something that a lot of kiddos don't necessarily understand when they're being questioned. Judge Watson, you talked about the justice system being a place for rehabilitation, but sometimes kiddos can end up in the justice system and they don't necessarily need to be rehabilitated because they're not the ones who did it, but because they spoke and they answered questions and they did not exercise their right to remain silent, they end up charged because their words are used against them. And sometimes we see, false confessions and that kind of thing. So Judge Watson, what would you like to add regarding that?
Well, there are lots of things that happen in the school environment. Many school environments have Crime Stoppers, which are rewards for certain tips and activity that go on in the school. Well, sometimes some of the kids wanting the Crime Stoppers money may very well, in fact, frame implicate a juvenile in something that he or she really didn't do, or was at most aware that something took place, but did not actively commit the offense. Many times you do need proper representation when you come into court, because that can be the difference in whether your child end up in the system or not. A juvenile practitioner understands Crime Stopper rewards. They understand incentives that juveniles have for saying things against other kids. They understand gangs. They understand cliques. They understand things that are necessary to defend much of the behavior that the child may be charged with. So I do echo on having proper representation. Not all court-appointed representation is poor representation. Let me be clear. But an attorney who, in fact, represent juveniles and understand young people and understand that area of the law, I would emphasize, is most important, whether they are court-appointed or retained. And that's what I would suggest that people do when representing juveniles, because you can get caught up in the system in many ways, and as you stated, not be guilty of the offense.
And Tammie, what are your thoughts here? Judge Fields mentioned a little bit ago that, louder isn't always better. And I'm sure as an advocate, a number of parents have come to you, very loud, but that doesn't always get you heard. So Tammie, what are your thoughts there, and what's the best way for parents to get heard?
Damall, the best way to be heard is to know what is going on. So first and foremost, you need to talk with your child from the beginning in terms of that student parent handbook. Know what the rules and guidelines are. And then from there, you make sure that they're following their own rules and guidelines. Under FERPA, you have the right to examine your child's school's record. And you don't have to pay if you're not requesting copies. And I think it's only a nominal fee for copies. But you can be loud in a different way. And we have got to know how to be loud. As Judge Fields said, we all want to make sure that people know that we're not going to take it in terms of you messing with our children. But you got to be loud in another way. You got to know your rights. You got to make sure that your child knows not to speak. And those are things that you can share with your child, because the first line of communication is with your child. Make sure what is going on. And then you know how to advocate, but be proactive in the process. That toolkit is to prevent it from escalating, to prevent any type of issues where the school would ordinarily just go on and issue a suspension for your child, but because you have been proactive and you know your child's educator, they'll give you a call. So all of that information, empowering yourself through this toolkit and being loud in another way, not being loud and maybe a physical way. That's what we are trying to achieve with this school kit. 25 years of working and doing this. And I know if we are proactive, we can derail this school to prison pipeline. And I just thank all of the panelists who are with us and giving this expertise, because it's going to take all us working together to stop this.
This panel is certainly a group of experts on the topic. And Tammie, right now, a lot of kiddos are not in school. They're virtual learning because of the pandemic. But why is right now the time for parents to arm themselves with this information and to get familiarized with the toolkit while their kid may not be in school right now?
Damall, this is the perfect time. We need to be ready when our children return to school, and not trying to do this once a child is already, even though you can use it in terms of escalating, but using it as a preventive tool to make sure that your child is not another statistic. This is the perfect time when children are not in school for you to get armed with the information you need to proactively advocate for your children.
Damall, can I add something if you don't mind?
Absolutely, yes, please.
You know, one of the, I guess, silver linings of this pandemic cloud is that we've all become much more accustomed to using virtual communication tools. We have a lot of different kinds of families in Harrison surrounding counties. We have two-parent families, we have single-parent families, we have blended families. And a lot of our families are working 2 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet. But we also know that family and parental contact with educators and administrators is one of the most productive ways to keep our kids out of trouble. Now we know that we can do that through a parent-teacher conference by Zoom. We can make phone calls. We know how to do other things and have other avenues for talking with our teachers and administrators. Ask to set up Zoom parent-teacher conferences with your students. Ask to do other things to make sure that they see you. Because a teacher, you know, and I come from a family of teachers, A teacher is a whole lot less likely to view a kid as problematic when they know, hey, I can go to this child's parent and there's going to be some repercussion. There's going to be some conversation in the home. It's the parent who is never seen and the child who is kind of out there fending for themselves that oftentimes finds themselves shuffled into this. And I call it a cradle to prison pipeline, like the Appleseed Project, because, you know, the number one precursor to entrance into the juvenile justice system is poverty. And the number one precursor into entrance in the adult criminal justice system is exposure to the juvenile justice system and poverty. So we're really looking at a cradle to prison pipeline, and we do need to disrupt it.
Well, that's absolutely heartbreaking to hear that. And it's even more heartbreaking to know that that's actually happening. So those are some of the things that you guys are seeing. We're talking about 17, 16, 15, 14, 13. How young are we talking about here?
10 is the youngest that a child can go into the juvenile justice system. 10 years old. 10
years old. And, we actually had a few 10-year-olds. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Damall, I just want to add that, yes, this is Tammie Campbell. I just wanted to add that this is the perfect time because when students return to school, we're going to have all other kind of issues that are returning with them that are not going to be received and have as much patience as the parents have with their children. But the children, in terms of even interacting again and being sociable, because they've been at home. So all of these things are going to show up because of the pandemic. Is going to be even more so. And with our children looked at in a way that they're not considered for making immature decisions. We want to make sure that we talk to them and let them know that you are being watched in a different way, and helping them to understand how to, because this is real, and we want to be real with our children. And with that, that toolkit will help parents during a time that they have more time to really get familiar with how to advocate for their children before they launched into that particular situation or incident.
And, I can recall a couple of summers ago, we had several 10-year-olds who were part of a ring of, alleged robbers who were going around in the Third Ward and Woodbury areas, supposedly robbing people. And several of those kids who ended up arrested were as young as 10. Dr. Henderson, we haven't heard from you in a while. Regarding your research, what does your research show you about these young kiddos who are getting into the criminal justice system?
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. I wanted to let it, evolve naturally. But I think one of the pieces that we're overlooking here, myself included, and I have to be reminded that there are some structural issues at play here that we oftentimes overlook. We have to stop criminalizing kids for being kids. As you mentioned, youngest 10-year-old, there's opportunity for a kid to change their life. Psychologists tell us that the brain doesn't stop growth until the age of 25. And so maturation, we need to have a conversation about when is a person really mature. We can debate about whether or not that's 18, 25, but I think we all understand that what you think at 18 is not the way you think at 30. And so there are a lot of kids who are between the ages of 10 and 18 who make kid mistakes and they get caught. Some of us didn't get caught, and so we don't end up in that place. But I think that at the end of the day, we need to understand that we have a system that needs to figure out what actually a crime is or delinquency really is, and leave the other issues for the kids to be able to deal with those as they normally do. The other piece is that we've criminalized our juvenile justice system. We've criminalized our educational system. Many people are calling for the removal of school resource officers from our schools, and that's a debatable issue, but I think that's one that's worthy of having. But at the end of the day, there are a host of offenses or delinquencies or behaviors that we can take away from our system, and we can move those away so that the kids don't end up in our juvenile justice system.
And I've read that Black and brown students are more likely to be arrested and to end up in a criminal justice system if there is a school resource officer in the school. Is that, do you guys find that to be true?
Yeah, no, that's true all across the country. As a matter of fact, that's accepted common fact. When you look back at the juvenile justice system, as the judge highlighted earlier, the intention of the juvenile justice system was to provide opportunity for people to transform. But the reality of it is now there's very little distinction between it and our adult system. We're having a national movement toward criminal justice reform, but it's very interesting that we've overlooked juvenile justice reform, which is our foundation. And hopefully we're able to get back with conversations and toolkits that we're having as the foundation of our conversation tonight. But I think we need to be very sensitive to the impact of being delinquent as a kid and being labeled as such, and its impact on future criminal justice experiences.
And I spoke about the kids, the 10-year-olds who were arrested, allegedly for committing robberies. That's a very serious and violent crime. Are we seeing the kids who are taken away from schools, are we seeing that they are actually being arrested for legitimate crimes, or are Black and brown children more likely to be taken away and put in the criminal justice system for something that's really kind of frivolous and that could be on the border of, oh, that's just an immature kid?
Well, I think legitimacy is a very subjective term. When you look at the fact that Black and brown kids are more likely to be caught, there was a study a couple of years ago where they placed a camera in the classroom and they made noises in the classroom, and they tracked the place so the teacher was more likely to look as soon as she heard a noise. And what they found is that as soon as the teacher hears a noise in the classroom, they're more likely to look at the Black and brown kids. And so we have a school system where our teachers, they have inherent biases. They have biases that enact themselves in our juvenile justice system. And so we need to retrain our thinking about how we deal with Black and brown kids, because they've been labeled delinquency based on the status of being Black. And again, I'm not saying that all these kids are not worthy of being in our juvenile justice system, but we have a system that's more likely to place them there than anyone else for very similar behaviors.
And let's hear from the two judges on the panel. Do you typically see more Black and brown kiddos in the courtroom?
Yes, we do. There is a disproportionate amount of African American and Latino kids that are represented in the juvenile justice system. Let me echo a little bit on what I see in court now with the pandemic that was talked about. Many kids are not learning the way they should virtually. I see a lot of kids that, quite frankly, have checked out, as I call it. This whole year has been traumatic for them in some ways. Some of them have lost loved ones. Some of their families have experienced unemployment. They are not in school. They are not learning. Many of them, if they're on the computer, they're not in virtual school. They're doing something else. We have quite a few kids, a lot more than before the pandemic, who are failing, and it is serious. So there is a large amount of young people who have lost a year since this pandemic. And that frustration will be seen in the classroom. As Tammie Campbell has stated before, the manifestation of that frustration, we don't know how it will look. For some kids, they may sit in a corner. For others, they may become a class clown. But unfortunately, it can result in a teacher requesting that child's removal. And as a result of that, if that parent is not armed with something like this toolkit, or armed with understanding the student code of conduct and what is necessary to try to defend and protect her child or his child, you can see a lot of kids being placed out of the classroom. So this pandemic, the situations we've had, quite frankly, from Harvey to the Arctic blast to the pandemic, those are layers of trauma, and our young people are experiencing something from it. And we have to recognize that and have to recognize also that it has interrupted in their learning.
Just dovetailing off of what the judges said, we are, all of us, going through a collective post-traumatic stress. We have been through cold front Uri. We have been through the year of pandemic. We've been through very stressful political times. We've been through the George Floyd protests. All of these things will manifest themselves in our schools in a very short period of time. You know, when we see something as horrific and tragic as a school shooting, we see school counselors ramped up. We see children being talked to about how they feel about those issues, because as we know, those of us who are parents, our children process their feelings through their actions. And if we don't put a concerted effort into reaching out to our children and saying, how did this impact you? How did you deal with this? How have you functioned during this time? How is your family? If we don't start to have those conversations now, before they get back, it's going to be a very difficult situation. I think Tammie said it essentially best. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's what they used to tell us in the Army. We've got to properly prepare our kids right now, and ourselves, because we've been through the same traumatic exposure. So we've all got to prepare right now for what's going to happen with our children to keep them out of this system.
That makes a lot of sense. And it isn't often that we get to, I was just going to remind the viewers that it isn't often we get to hear the expertise of our panelists. So if you have a question, please ask that question on Twitter. Use the hashtag Black and Brown Parent Forum. Again, hashtag Black and Brown Parent Forum. Please ask our panelists a question before this wraps up at 7 o'clock. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. I would just like to add to Judge Watson and Judge Phil's comments that we got to be proactive with parents. My hope is that the school system will be proactive as well in providing more counselors and social workers, and then trying to hire more campus police officers. There's a desperate need for, and especially during this time, to up the ante on social workers. And really, when those students return, to really have one-on-one meetings with students to see what their needs are, and to talk to them, make sure that they know that they're there to listen and to help. So if we could get more counselors and social workers in the school, I think that would be tremendous in helping our children re-engage into the physical location of schools.
And Tammie, you have a lot of good information rolled up into one place in your toolkit. Was there one occurrence that happened, one family that you got involved with, or one thing that you witnessed that made you say, okay, I've got to tell parents how to advocate for their children?
Damall, I'm very pleased that you asked that question. Yeah, it was one parent, and that parent was me. My child, he is 32 now, but at the tender age of 5, he was body slammed by their officer for running in the hallway with another classmate. Now, this other classmate wasn't Black. He wasn't told to go to the back of the line. And my child, having a great sense of fairness, because that's what he was taught, refused to sit in kindergarten style. That was his way of protesting against the unfair treatment that he had received. And because of that, he was body slammed and dragged to the principal's office. And this is where we're talking about in terms of not necessarily the child doing anything wrong, but the people who are in system, like criminals, inhumane. So that is what really propelled me into fighting not only for my children, but to make sure no other child experienced this without me addressing it if I knew about it. So that's what propelled me into, for 25 years, fighting for equity and justice for our children who are being set up and are treated like criminals in the school system for
You know, that's very disturbing to hear about a 5-year-old slammed to the floor by an adult and dragged down the hall in school. And, you know, that you said that was 25 years ago. And now there's, you know, we have video of, we've all seen the videos of officers even, you know, slamming some girls in schools. Now, is that something that we have seen here in Houston, in some Houston courtrooms?
Well, as far as the courtroom, in regards to the officer's actions, probably not as much in my juvenile court. The focus is on the juvenile's actions. However, I have seen and I have heard from juveniles activity that later I've come to know was a little aggressive and probably not appropriate in how that juvenile was treated and how that juvenile was handled. Um, in order for parents, if they have issues with a school resource officer or any police departments and how they handled their juvenile, they should file a complaint. That is something that they should do. It's part of a record, it's part of a file, and it's necessary for a paper trail. And I will add on that, and the toolkit also expresses that when you're having issues with the school, use email, use a paper trail. That is important advocacy because you're letting the school know, you're putting them on notice that this is an issue, you know it's an issue, and you want it addressed. And so I would add always, we have the technology, create a paper trail.
And if we could all just sort of go around and give parents encouraging tips, what is your best advice for parents? What encouragement do you have for them? And just so that they can know how to best advocate for their kiddos and so that they can know that someone out there is listening and is on their side. Judge Fields, I'll start with you.
I was about to say I was taught to let ladies go first, but we live in in a new age. Once again, going back to what I said initially, you are your child's best advocate. And the way whenever I'm representing a client, the first thing I do is talk to them and see where they are, where they are in their headspace, where they are emotionally. And you've got to do that with your children. You have to speak with them. You have to talk with them. You have to engage with them. And you can never accept nothing as an answer. And we've all heard it from our kids. Hey, what'd you do today? Nothing. How was school today? Fine. What kind of homework do you have? Nothing. You can't accept nothing as an answer. There's always something. And so you want to reach out to them in a meaningful and productive way and have those conversations. And I know you're tired. I know you're working hard. I know you've been through the same stressors they have, but you are their best advocate. So advocate, starting in the home and finishing in the system if you have to. And we want to avoid that. Know your rights as a parent. Know what you are entitled to get from the school and what your kids are entitled to receive in terms of justice. Know your rights as a criminal defendant so that you can understand what it means to remain silent, to have that lawyer, to go through these processes in an intelligent and intelligible way. And also know that, as the judge said, students are hurting from being at home, but not every student is gonna thrive in a situation where they feel fear or where they feel isolated or where they feel bullied. whether that's by other students or by teachers and the administration. And understand, we've talked a lot about teachers, we've talked a lot about the administration. As I said, I come from a family of teachers, and our teachers are doing great work. And it was so heartening to see so many of them out there during this pandemic, giving food and comfort to their students and their students' families, even while their own families were suffering. And so we're not criticizing teachers and administrators. We're saying that it's easy for all of us to get caught up in the push of this system, and it can result in bad things happening for our children. And we have to be that disruptor, not that disruptive factor, but that disrupting factor to keep our students out of this system, our children out of this system. So reach out for these tools, understand your rights, know what it is that you're entitled to and what your child is entitled to. And finally, there's one situation where a child is considered an adult, and that's when they're 17. It is important for parents to understand that just because your child is a minor does not mean that he is not considered an adult for purposes of the criminal justice system. And so we have to reach out to our legislators, to our local representatives, to see what we can do about making sure that our children stay children all the way through the high school years and not turn into adults while they're in the middle of being a child.
Absolutely. Dr. Henderson?
I was going to say, make sure you meet your child's counselor. Make sure you meet their principal. Make sure you know their teacher. If those three entities know you, you have a point of direct contact. And I think that would make a better reality for your child, because you're going to need them at some point during their educational process. But also, I think that the student, the school must know that the parent is engaged. It doesn't matter how active you are. I think that as long as they know you're trying and they can reach out to you and be open and honest and listening to what there is, because it has to be a mutual relationship between the school and the parent. If they know that you're engaged in the process, I think it gives an opportunity for you to offset many issues that may come up during your child's educational process.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, when you know your child's administrators and school resource officer and their teachers, those people at your child's school, and they know that they can contact you, they're more likely to say, I'm calling your mom or dad, as opposed to I'm calling law enforcement. Is that right?
Right. No, I think so. I think we need to get back to believing in informal social control. Everything does not have to go through the criminal justice system. Sometimes a kid just needs to know that I'm going to call your parent, and that straightens them out. I think if we do that, and if parents allow teachers to feel comfortable doing that and vice versa, I think we'd be in a better place.
Judge Watson?
Think about the resources you have as parents, because you can use those resources in the event your child is placed in a system and the child needs rehabilitation. The church, the ministers, those are resources. Don't have to be people necessarily with PhDs and MDs. It can be people that you know and from other sources in the community that you can use to say, look, this is what I'm going to use. This is how we're going. We have a plan. You can start being creative. Understand that keeping your child angry is that the child is placed in a child makes life pretty difficult for a lot of people, and especially being locked up. And that's where some trauma comes in and some challenge come in. But if you can keep your child active, engaged in positive ways, that could prevent a lot of issues later with getting involved with delinquent conduct and getting involved with the wrong crowd. Lastly, as I stated before, the toolkit is great. Paper everything, email, keep a trail, prove your case, and always stay an advocate for your child.
Yeah, and staying involved, it absolutely makes a difference. My daughter's teachers are always very surprised at how much information I have about, everything that happens during the school day. And also my another phone call, someone trying to ask a question. But also my mom was always at my school, and my teachers had her on speed dial. She was at my school so much that my last high school reunion, all the students were asking, "Hey, where's your mom?" It's like, she's not supposed to be here at the reunion, but that makes all the difference in the world. And Tammie, as an advocate, how do you want to wrap this up? And what do you want to say to parents about, staying involved and advocating for your kiddo?
For this very important conversation. First of all, we want to emphasize that we want to encourage parents to make sure that they're doing their part with their child to make that classroom very productive, because the more productive that classroom is, the more productive your child can be. You want the school to be successful because you want your child to be successful. And in doing so, we all have to do our part. We all have to be partners of this system. This is not something that we just want to say that there's an issue only with the school system. Whenever you identify an issue that your child may have, it is your responsibility as a parent to make sure that you address that issue first and foremost. And then you make sure that you have a relationship, not only with your child, but with your child. So as Damall said, they will call you and have you on speed dial if anything occurs with your child. So that is a way to be proactive and prevent this school to prison pipeline. Always stay vigilant, develop yourself with other parents, where that when you go into have lunch with your child, just something small, you be in a group where you're looking not only after your own child, but other children, which propelled me into this real process of advocating, because I didn't want anyone else's child to experience what my child had experienced. So we as parents have to work together, and we have to work with our educational system and being proactive and making sure that our children are getting what they need, including parental involvement in school. So take this toolkit, use it just like it's your handbook. Go to www.honeybrownhope.org, access that information. And remember, information is power. With that power, you're able to advocate effectively for your children. Thank you, Damall, and thank you, panel members. I really appreciate all of you.
You're welcome. Information certainly is power. And we thank you also to the viewers for joining us for the How to Advocate for Your Child Forum for Black and Brown Parents and Guardians during the pandemic and after, hosted by the Honey Brown Hope Foundation in partnership with Fox 26 News. And again, thank you so much to the panelists for your insight, your expertise, and just for being here to help Houston area parents. We really appreciate you guys. So thank you, Tammie Campbell, Dr. Howard Henderson, Judge Michael Fields, and Judge Teana Watson. Thank you so much for being here and offering your expertise.
Thank you.
And I also want to give a special thanks to Honey Brown Hope Foundation Communications Director Sharday Campbell for helping coordinate this very, very important event. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Be safe and God bless.
Thank you.